Hello, Audra, and welcome to my podcast, Becoming Secure with Magsmindset. I'm so excited that you're here. I was very intrigued by the email that I got from you because I grew up with Christianity in my family, but I don't know a whole lot about other religions within Christianity. And lately, I've been hearing more about Mormons. And what stood out to me is that you grew up Mormon. And I want to understand more what it is like to grow up in an environment like that and what does Christianity look like from that point of view, and also understand your relationship with that upbringing and that whole community, if you will, today. So I'm really excited to learn from you today. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm happy to share.
Awesome. Yeah. Why don't you just start a little bit about what it's like to grow up in a Mormon family?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a very strict Mormon household. And so for your listeners who don't know very much about the Mormon faith, it's a denomination of Christianity, but definitely with its own flair. Many would describe it as a high demand or high control religion. So it's not just a belief in God and then going to church on Sunday. It is your entire lifestyle, it's your community, it's your social structure, it's your entire life is also largely prescribed and dictated to you, especially as women. As
Mm.
women, you know that your role is to get married young and start having children and raise children in the kingdom of God. And so from a very young age, I was constantly taught about my goal of temple marriage. So Mormons have a temple where you go to get married, but only elite Mormons can go into the Mormon temple. So there's also like a hierarchy of righteousness.
Hmm.
And so when I say it's a high demand religion, it's because you're always trying to prove your worth, right? Even to get into the temple, you have to have an interview. There's all these conditions you have to meet to receive the blessings of God, to be worthy, to be lovable. And it's very much about obedience. So like as a child, well, my whole upbringing, but I remember as a child, like I was the one in Sunday school who would listen to the lesson and say, like, that doesn't really make sense to me. I don't really understand that, because they also had really strict rules, like no coffee. You weren't even allowed to drink coffee. And like
I've heard that.
the reasoning behind it never made sense to me. And I remember questioning it many, many times, and the answer would slightly change every time I asked. But then finally, the answer I received from someone at church was, you know what? It's not really about the caffeine. It's really just about being obedient. That if God is going to give you a rule, he wants to see that you're going to follow it without asking questions. Because like I said, I was the one who was always questioning, but anytime I would bring up a doubt or, I'm not really sure how I think about that, the answer was always the same. The answer was those feelings that you have are coming from Satan, and you're feeling them because you're vulnerable to him. So you don't have to understand how the Lord works because the Lord works in mysterious ways. You just have to be obedient and you just have to follow it. And so if you are feeling doubts and you're questioning, you need to have more faith, you need to read your scriptures, and you need to pray more.
Wow.
Yeah,
I I'm so okay. I'm recognizing that I have very visual expressions and I probably am coming across way more
that's
judgmental than I
okay.
intend to.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It brings up a lot of triggering things,
I guess
I
that's what it is. I guess that what you're saying is triggering, and it's
yeah.
triggering because, for one, it's far-fetched from what my understanding of who God is. That's not the narrative that I was fed when I grew up, and that's still certainly not the way that I know God in my relationship with God. So,
Right.
so immediately I'm like, that doesn't sound right, and but then again, I'm also trying to make a point these days of like wherever you go into the world, everyone is going to have their own narration of what is right and what is wrong. I have just been fed a perspective and a narrative, and I'm trying to be very open-minded in that. So I guess one way of looking at it I it could be what are something that it's not like I want to diminish that it is probably a really hard experience for people to grow up because you feel silenced and you feel like you're not exactly getting to you, like being curious is a part of nature. Asking questions is a part of learning. That's the way you grow. That's the way you expand. So when someone is putting a lid on your ability to learn more and understand more and stay curious, I can only imagine that must feel incredibly entrapping. What was it like for you? Like, did you feel at any point that you were being boxed in and you needed to break out, or did you have some sort of pivotal moment? I guess I have so many questions right now. But yeah, whatever you feel like is the most fun
Yeah.
answer to question. No,
I think, in hindsight, I look back at my growing up years and I always felt boxed in. I never felt like I fit in. I always felt like I was constantly trying to prove myself, but I didn't recognize it for what it was because I was born and raised in it. Right.
yeah,
And also just the conditioning of who you're going to be. Like, in order to be worthy for the blessings of God in the afterlife and in this life, I knew I needed to get married and start having children. And so I got married very young. I was 20 years old when I got married. I'd only known my husband for 6 months. We did the whole Mormon thing, got married in the Mormon temple, started having kids right away. And then for me, where I really started to feel like I was in a cage was when I have 3 kids. And when my youngest was about 4 years old, I really started struggling with severe anxiety and depression, like to the point where I was having panic attacks almost every night. And panic attacks for me looked like hyperventilating, like I just couldn't get a breath. And at the time, like I didn't know what it was. Now looking back, I know that was my body screaming at me that I needed to break out, that I was being suppressed, that I was in a life that was not aligned with who I was. But I didn't even know who I was because I had spent my entire life being who I was told to be. And so I went to my family doctor and I need help. Like I can't go on like this. And so he prescribed antidepressants. So I was on antidepressants for a while and they didn't work for me. And now I know why they didn't work for me because the problem was not a chemical imbalance in my brain. The problem was that I was in a life that wasn't mine. I had no freedom. I had no choice. I wasn't allowed to question. I was constantly pushing my doubts down to become who I was told I needed to be. And really, what that did over all the years of growing up that way and now raising my kids in this system was it taught me to distrust myself.
yeah. Oh, your instinct. It was
Yeah.
essentially just suppressing your instinct because every instinct that led to a question went unanswered. How
Yes,
frustrating.
exactly. Exactly. And like I would bring my questions up like in church or to family members and I was never satisfied with the answer because the answer was always the same. The answer was always you don't have to know how the Lord works. You just have to be obedient and you will receive your reward in heaven in the afterlife. And after hearing that your whole life, it gets to the point where you're like that's not good enough anymore. That's just not good enough anymore.
I feel so inclined to ask if is it your impression that Mormon people are generally happy?
That's a very good question. So, the conditioning that I received when I was in the church was that Mormons were the happiest, that we had the one true way to back
Right.
to God, the one true belief, the one true religion, and that we had the fullness of the gospel, which brought true happiness. And everyone else only had pieces of happiness, but not the full happiness that we had. That's what I was taught. And actually, where I started to see that wasn't true was my family and we moved overseas. So when my kids were ages 7, 9, and 11, my husband and I were teachers at the time, and we found out about international schools, American international schools overseas. And we were like, this is such a great opportunity for our family. So we moved overseas. And what that did for me, related to your question about happiness, was I'm now being exposed to all these different beliefs. And in international schools, you're surrounded by expats from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am meeting people from 30, 40 different countries, different beliefs, different religions, different cultures. And I would travel to places like a Hindu temple or a Muslim mosque or a Catholic cathedral or a Zoroastrian fire temple. And I would see the followers, and they seemed so content and so convicted in their faith and so happy.
Mm.
And I remember thinking, wait a second, but I was told that they were miserable and that they couldn't be as happy as I was, but they actually seem a lot happier than I have
Wow.
ever been in the church. So that really got me thinking about, I don't think that's true. So if that's not true, what else isn't true?
Mm. That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that must have been quite the realization. I've had, no, I don't want to compare the backgrounds or whatever, or where we came from, but what I do recognize is when you are staying in the same country for an extended period of time. For me, it was 22 years before I moved away from my home country. And growing up in Norway, we've always been told that, like, when you were born in Norway, you won the lottery. You are so privileged. You're so lucky. You're the luckiest person in the world. Like, that is essentially what you're fed. You're always told that wherever you are, wherever else you go, like, you are better off in Norway. Like, it's better here. And the truth is, in many ways, it's true. But when you grow up in it, you have no idea why that's true. The only way I was able to identify or recognize my privilege and how lucky I was growing up in Norway was moving to experience
Mm,
perspective. It's
mm,
when you're experiencing perspective and when you're seeing something from a completely different point of view, and you realize that these people aren't crazy, these people aren't unhappy, these people aren't like completely out there. Like, my impression of like what a Trump supporter would be, for instance, like, they're just the worst person in the world. But then just realizing, oh, they're just human beings, just as myself, and seeing everything from different points of view, like traveling all over the US, traveling in Asia, seeing completely different religions. Exactly what you're saying. It's the perspective that allows you to recognize where you got where you are. It's just for you, was you recognized it wasn't as good. But when I returned to Norway, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a great country. I am privileged.
Yeah, I think that travel and different experiences really help to give us a different perspective. And for me, that was really pivotal in my journey in leaving the Mormon church. Before we went overseas, I was already questioning, I was
Right.
already one foot out the door. But then when we moved overseas, yes, I was having this experience with meeting people from all over the world and this cognitive dissonance of like, wait a second, that's not what I was told, right?
Yeah.
And also, a couple things like in the Mormon faith, you're very much you're very much taught that you are elite, that you are special,
Mm.
that you are better than everyone else, that you have this fullness of the gospel. And a big part of the Mormon religion is missionary work. And they
Mm.
have this saying, every member a missionary. So, like, there's always this ulterior motive when you're friends with someone who's not Mormon of like trying to trying to
That's
convert them to
so
your faith.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
I remember being overseas and thinking, how arrogant of me to I could never go to these people who have different beliefs than me and say, what you believe is wrong, what I believe is right. There's only one way. You have to believe what I believe. I was like, I
Mhm.
could never do that because I'm seeing how happy they are and they're happier than I was. And I'm like, I can't do that. So it also started to show me that the world is not, it's not dichotomous. There's not just right or wrong. There's not just one way or no way. That there's just this variety of beliefs, and they can all be diverse and beautiful and unique to the person, and that's
Right.
okay. So I started to really break out of that mindset too, that there was only one way and one right, and everyone had to be the same. Because I grew up in a monoculture
Right.
where we were all the same because the
Right.
church is so insular.
It's so interesting. Yeah, you don't give me the impression that you rebelled against or completely broke out or had some sort of like opposition against the Mormon church, but it does sound of the words that you're using that you did leave the church eventually. So what did that process look like and what were the reactions?
Yeah, I mean, the process, like I said, it was a slow erosion for me. It was, a lot of people really get caught up in like the negative of the church, some of the old doctrines or the church history, and then when they leave, they have a lot of anger towards it and they have a lot of
Mhm.
hurt towards it. And like I completely understand that path, because that's also part of like the healing journey, is to feel through those emotions and make sense of the things that you feel like you were lied to about, or the things that were taken from you. And that was part of my journey too. Um, I'm now at a place, I've been out 11 years, and I've done a
Mhm.
lot of healing work, a lot of identity work, a lot of deep dives into who I am, a lot of stories I can share about that process. But now I'm at a place where I can look back at family members who are still in the church, who, when I first left, reacted with a lot of anger to
Mhm.
me. And I can look back at that and I can reframe it. And instead of just being offended and feeling like they're pushing me away, I can reframe it as, that was, however misguided I see it, that was their way of showing that they care. That might have been their way of trying to stay connected, because they did and still do have the belief that, we all need to believe the same thing, and that I'm basically eternally damned because I left the church. And so when they come at me with like a scriptural quote in a text message or something, it used to really activate me, like, oh my gosh, can't they just respect my decision to leave? And why do they have to keep trying to convince me? But then when I really do some perspective taking and I sit and I remember, like, I used to believe that way too. And they really do think has ruined my entire life. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, I don't agree with that, but I can see the intention behind the messages, right? So I'm not as activated as I used to be. But that's taken a lot of work. I would say
Mhm.
that's not a place I was at when I first left, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely believe that even growing up in the most protective of environments and being so safe and so secure on so many levels that I didn't even understand. Like, even I rebelled against my parents in one way or another, not necessarily like anything grand, but I think it's just part of growing up and forming your own identity too, and recognizing that all the generations are ever changing, and with all the generations there's just more awareness, and today we have access to so much more information than they did before, or it looked completely differently and you had to add in some extra effort in order to know what you can easily access today, which like information. And yeah, I think it's a natural part of the healing process to just express that there's a loss. Even if it's for the better, it's still a loss because there's people that you care about. There's probably traditions that are still great. There's probably a lot within the
Yeah.
community that actually gives more than it takes as well. But ultimately wanting to go your own path, it is a loss in leaving that life that is familiar. So it makes sense that there's
Especially,
anger.
yeah, and especially like a high demand religion like Mormonism, because it's not just, a belief in God and going to church on Sunday. It is your entire life. It is your entire community. So when you leave something like that, grief is a huge part of it. You have a
Yeah,
lot of grief, and it's a different kind of grief than like grief over the death of a loved one,
right.
because the people that you're grieving are still alive, but and they're maybe some of them are still in your life, and maybe some of them aren't in your life. And so you have to heal from that grief on how that relationship has fundamentally changed. There's also a lot of loss over identity because so many, especially women, when we leave the church, I was 35 years old when I left. So that was 35 years of me following the prescribed path and
Right.
being told who I was, and I was supposed to be a mother and a nurturer, and what my role was and how to raise my kids. That's a big one because you're basically told how to raise your kids, every detail of raising kids down to what age they should start dating, right? And then I left, and it was like I had no more certainty, I had no more answers. But yet, so I knew what I wasn't. Like I was very, very clear on my decision to leave the church that I am not Mormon. But then it was like, I know what I'm not, but then what am I? So I had this real loss of self. And when I first left, I didn't have a process to know how to start rebuilding. And in a lot of ways, I felt like I was growing up all over again alongside my children
Mhm.
because my identity was taken from me, or it wasn't. I decided to throw the identity that was given to me
Yeah.
out the
Yeah.
window. That's probably a better way to say that. And, your identity is formed at a very young age. So I kind of felt like I was going back to 7-year-old Audra and
Yeah.
starting to rebuild from there, but while raising kids at the same time.
That's what you just said, all of that just reminded me of something I had asked my friend earlier, like, do you have any questions that you suggest that I will ask? And one of them was actually really good about exactly what you just said, because the question was, let's see, where is it exactly? Yeah, have their lifestyle and habits changed now that they aren't church limits placed on what they can do? And I think that was so interesting of a question, and because of what you said, that reminded me, because you've been told, as you said, exactly how to show up, what to do, how to raise your children. But all of a sudden, it's as if that lid that was always here on top of you, telling you what to do, is now lifted. So, how do you come to conclusions about what is right and what is wrong? And what did that look like to you?
At first, when I first left, I didn't have a process. I was like throwing darts in the dark, honestly. Like, I don't know. I was just experimenting with everything, but also that conditioning was still there. And it took a long time to recognize, in my subconscious that those identity and beliefs and values that are there subconsciously running everything in the background was still there. And then determining my thoughts and my emotions and my behaviors. And so at first, like I said, I just threw darts in the dark. I just tried different things. But then one of the first things I did as a mom, because I had a lot of mom guilt when I
Right.
left. I started raising my kids in this church. Now I'm totally changing my mind. And the church did have some very good things that it taught me. It was very, family values, moral
Hmm.
compass, all about like service and helping others.
Right.
And I thought, there is some good that I want to keep. So how do I decide what I want to keep and what I want to get rid of? And that has been a very long process. But one of the first things that we did, because we felt so ungrounded as a family, was we got the kids together and we said, we're going to come up with a Phelps family mission statement. And
Mm.
we're going to decide what values are important to us. And we're going to decide that as to what feels good to us. So that was
Mm.
the first step into reclaiming authority over my own life and not letting an external authority tell me what my values were and how I should live my life and how I was going to guide my children. And that was really powerful because we got all the kids together and we said, we want everyone to share what they think, what values are important to them, and what values that you think will make you a good person and can help guide the decisions that you make in your life. And so everybody came, with different values, different ideas, and then we made a mission statement based on the common ones that we all shared. And
Right.
then we painted it into like a family mural. And that was my first step in my healing journey of like taking my power back,
Right.
that I can make these decisions for me and my family on my own. I don't need to consult someone else or go to an outside authority, that I could actually make those decisions of what's best for my family together with my family. And we were the only opinions that mattered.
That's so beautiful. I really admire that process. I have never heard anyone ever do that, like not in the way that you explained it anyways. And I really want to take note of that. I think that is a really good way about going, yeah, about building your family. Just
Yeah.
aligning on values from the get-go. And whenever, like, I can only imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously you go through life and you have arguments with children, with well, siblings, and with partners. It's just life. But when you're all agreeing on what your fundamental values are, it's easier to go back to baseline and be like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here?
Yes, exactly. And so that's what I was trying to do, because I all of those values had been given to me before. And so now I thought, okay, if I'm reinventing myself and the kind of mom I want to be, I need something,
Mm,
but we all need to agree. And I wanted my kids to feel ownership of it, because I basically wanted to give my kids an upbringing that I never had,
yeah.
but I didn't have a model for that. I wasn't
Mm,
raised that way. So I didn't know how to do it. So that was my first, let's try this out,
right.
but I wanted to make sure everybody was involved and everyone felt like their opinion mattered. And I wasn't
Right.
just giving them the mission statement that I had created, that it was a joint
Right.
effort.
That's so nice. Also, this also it makes me wonder what your relationship with your husband has been throughout that whole journey. Granted that you decided to get out of it together.
So, I mean, consciously questioned for about 10 years before I left. And every time I had a doubt or, I was really feeling unsure about something, I would always go to him. And we've always had a relationship that is just based on open communication. And one of his traits that I love is that he's really just listened to understand. He's
Mhm,
never like listened to convince me of his way or listened to respond. He's just listened
mhm,
to understand. And so, many times we were on the same page and he would have the same doubts and the same questions. And then when I made the decision to say I am not Mormon, which was the hardest thing to verbalize, because
right.
I am is, that's an identity statement. But when I made that decision to verbalize that, he was the first one that I told, and he just listened. And then he said, I can see that this is the decision that you need to make. And he said, I have a lot of questions too, but I'm not there yet. I can't
Mhm,
yet say I am not Mormon. And so I said, okay, that's fair. And he said, I might still go to church sometimes. And if the kids want to go, I'll see if the kids want to go. Um, and so I gave him that freedom and space to do what he needed to do. And he gave me the freedom and space to walk away. But then about a year later, his exodus from the church was a little quieter than mine. But about a year later, he came to me and he said, yeah, I'm done. I'm
yeah.
done. And he had the biggest sign that you're done with the Mormon church is, so Mormons wear like this special underwear that you're given when you go to the temple.
Okay.
And so, and you're supposed to wear it all the time. And the biggest sign that you're really done is when you take that off. And
Mm,
so he said, I've taken off my garments, is what they're called, and I'm done.
mm.
So
Wow.
about a year after he left as well.
I love that you gave him so much space to acknowledge his own journey and that you didn't. Well, I mean, I guess that's what you've established already in your own journey is that you don't want anyone to tell you what to do. So why would you do the same kind of? But yeah, I think still it's really really beautiful because I wonder sometimes when I get strong convictions, I just want everyone to be on page, on the same page. So yeah,
For
it's
sure,
admirable.
for sure. And like when I first left, I had a lot of resentment like towards family members who were still in,
Mm,
like Can't they see? Don't they understand? I also had resentment because they kept trying to convert me to come back. They tried to convince me of the error of my ways. So there was this real conflict for a while.
Mm.
And then, you know, it was several years later actually that I realized, you know what? I'm asking them to respect my choice to leave and to accept me for who I am, even though it's different than the path that they wanted me to take. But I'm not extending that same respect back to them. Like
Wow.
I don't want them to judge me for leaving, but I'm judging them for staying.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's very good self-awareness.
Well, that took many years. That was not something that was right away, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, when I came to that realization, that's what helped, you know, as I was talking earlier about doing some perspective taking and reframing of like, you know, how would I want to be treated in this situation and
So
extending that.
I'm really curious. I suppose your children are older now, so I wonder, have you had conscious conversations with them about what their experience in that transition was and to what degree they're, yeah, grateful for the life that they currently have? Or, yeah, what does that conversation look like for you
Yeah, you
guys?
know, it's interesting. When I first left, you know, besides doing that mission statement, I never really like sat the kids down and was like, I'm leaving the church. It was never
Mm,
this big conversation because I was afraid. I didn't know how they would react. I had started
mm,
raising them in it. And I was also really uncertain on who I was. And I felt like I still had this definition of a good mom, that a good mom has keeps their kids grounded and has certainty and guides them in the right path. And I didn't even know what the right path was. So
yeah.
so I was scared to talk to them about it directly, but I did a lot of indirect things like this mission statement and things like
Right.
that. But now they're older, so my kids are ages 24, 22, and 20.
Mm,
And a few months ago, actually, my middle daughter, we were talking about, you know, my journey leaving the church and dealing with family after I left the church. And she said, you know, Mom, you never really like sat us down and said, like, hey, I'm leaving or I don't believe this anymore. And I said, you know, I was afraid. I was really afraid. I didn't know how you would take it. And I had a lot of mom guilt too. Like I felt like I was ruining your lives because of this pivotal transition that I was making. And I said, and also I wanted to protect you from a lot of the hurt and the pain that I was feeling around that experience. And she said, I think if you would have told us, we would have understood and we could have helped you through it.
no, that's nice.
And I just thought, oh, I don't know, made me really proud as a mom, you know, that she was extending this grace to me.
Mm,
And now I see the way my kids are. I see that they are very independent, that they are free thinkers, and also that they are friends with such a variety of people and they're so accepting of everyone and different
mm,
beliefs. And the world is this big, wonderful learning playground for them.
that's
And I
awesome.
love that. Yeah, I really love that.
That's awesome. I this whole conversation is so intriguing and so insightful for me in so many ways. I feel like I thought I was gonna, well, of course, I'm learning a lot about Mormons, but I also feel like I'm learning a lot about parenting. And that's kind of toward just like, yeah, family values, which is great. But I'm also very curious though, what is your relationship with God like today?
That's a good question. When I left, one of the realizations I came to was that the church was a middleman and that there was me and there was God or universe or source or spirit, whatever you want to call it. And that for 35 years, I let the church be the middleman. I let the church interpret my relationship with God. I let the church tell me what God was telling me. And so when I left, um, at first I didn't really know what to believe, right? And so I just kept some distance from all organized religion for a while. I think that it was a bit of a trauma response for me to research any kind of organized religion. Now I find spirituality a on a very personal level. And I definitely feel close to a higher energy, especially when I'm in nature or I
Mm.
do a lot of meditation in the mornings, and I can feel that connection, and it feels very personal and very personable and very warm and welcome. And it's a much lighter, more freeing feeling than I ever felt when I was in an organized religion.
That's so nice. I mean, that's exactly how I feel in my relationship with God. And that was also not born from a place of having been raised in a certain way, because my parents never went to church as often. It was just Norway is more or less a Christian country. So we have a lot of the traditions and well, we have all the traditions and all the holidays and all of that is just a part of our culture and a lot of the values as well. But more people are more or less not practicing it as much as they
Mm.
used to. But for me, I remember having my first ever heartbreak, not thinking I was ever going to survive that and praying because I had learned as a child that I can pray, I can talk to God. Like my mom taught me how to pray or just sing phrases to God. And in those conversations, I would find so much solace. And that is that piece that you're describing, that feeling that there is a presence, there is something here, there is a comfort, and I feel safe here. And I just continued speaking the word back to God and just confirming that I understand what you're saying. I understand the role you play in my life. And I understand that what you actually want from me is to love and love louder and to love everyone and to trust that you got it for me. Tomorrow is taken care of. I'm safe and I'm taken care of. I'm provided for. And I think in the process of just having those conversations where I'm speaking the word back, I definitely find that feeling of peace and trust and just knowing that I am in fact fine, and safe. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. And I think, especially for people who are reconstructing themselves and their lives after leaving any kind of a system that's really high control, one of the most difficult things to do is to tune back into what aligns with you, to
yeah.
tune back into your body, to listen to your body. And that was something I had to learn how to do, was really pay attention to those moments when I was feeling activated or constrictive, like,
Yeah.
something was heavy on my chest or I felt like I couldn't get a deep breath. That's an opportunity to go, okay, pause for a minute here. Something is not aligning.
Yeah.
Something's not aligning with who I am, with my connection to a higher energy. Something is not aligning here. And
Mm,
usually there's some kind of a belief that is replaying in your subconscious that is giving you that feeling of constriction. And so you need to really dive in and go, okay, what is the emotion I'm feeling in this moment? And what's the belief behind it that's giving me this emotion? And then try and figure out where it came from. Like, when did I decide this? And who did I get this belief from? And usually it didn't come from you. Usually it's something you got as a small child from some
right.
kind of an outside source, a parent, a teacher, society, a religion, whatever it may be, right? And if it's feeling constrictive, then it's not aligned with who you are. So start the women that I work with, I always say, start poking holes in it. Start asking some more questions so that it's not an absolute truth for you. And then you can actually start to rewire your subconscious so it's not the well worn pattern anymore. So start asking
Mm,
questions like, is this belief always true? Is there ever a time that this belief is not true? And as you start to poke holes in it, then you can feel that constriction starts to lighten up a little bit, right?
yeah.
And then you can choose, okay, if that's not a belief that's really aligning with me, let me find a belief that feels expansive and open, like I can take a deep breath. And
Mm,
that's how you can start to uncover some of that conditioning, some of those old beliefs that are running your programming in the background, and you can start to install a new one. That's the
yeah.
first step.
I mean, it's so clear that you've become incredibly self-aware of how you are self-regulating in the process of, yeah, identifying who you want to be outside of the narrative that you were told your entire life. And I'm sure that you have so much more knowledge. I wish we had so much more time and we could talk about this. I would definitely love to have you back on a part 2 at some point and talk even more about this, because it's so clear to me that you know so much and it's incredibly valuable. I'm positive that someone who feels on the verge of making a similar decision, or have considered doing it, or feel trapped in some way, it doesn't even have to be because of a religion, it could just be because of ancestral beliefs that are
Mhm.
completely different. But what would you say to those people who are in that stage where they're questioning what they've always believed to be true, and how would you encourage them to take the next step towards themselves, essentially?
I would say keep questioning. Keep questioning. There's no danger in questions. In fact, I don't, your listeners who are listening in audio won't see it, but after I left the church, I got this tattoo, which
Oh,
is
the
a
question
question
mark.
mark with little light rays coming off of it.
I love that.
'Cause that was my experience, was the questioning led to enlightenment for me. The
Mm,
questioning led to who I really am. Questioning led to alignment. But as you're questioning, be open to the answers. And the answers are first going to come to you through your body.
yeah.
So pay attention to how your body feels when you're questioning and follow that. That's what I would say.
That's beautiful, Audra. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and for being here and for, yeah, enlightening all of us. I genuinely feel so much richer for this conversation. And I wonder, to wrap this up, like, is there anything we haven't talked about yet that you want to talk about?
If anyone listening here it has left a high control religion, specifically anyone who's an ex-Mormon or ex-LDS and is looking for some resources and they don't know what the next step is, reach out. Like, I'm now a full-time coach and I'm working with women who are navigating the grief and the guilt and the identity loss and what kind of a mom am I now? And I have an 8-week program called Reclaimed, which is very transformational. That's a curriculum and group coaching and one-on-one coaching as well. And I also do one-on-one coaching. So, reach out, go to my website, which is Mama Audra, MAMA, mamaAudra.com, and see what resonates with you.
Awesome. I will also make sure to include all of that description and all of that in the description below. And Audra, thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.